The following is a quick review covering Mapping Osiris Parts 1 through 10. Hey everybody, as you know, I've been digging into the alchemy of ancient Egypt, and I've also been comparing it to the alchemy that I find in art from the Christian side of things. And what I find is that in the alchemy of ancient Egypt and in the alchemy of Christianity, basically the theme is the same. I've shown you more. Here's an example between Christian and ancient Egyptian. As you can see, it centers on the third eye. It centers on the Ark of the Covenant, which some have said before is a black hole. Makes perfectly sense. It also is the area where the soul is, the Ark of the Covenant. See where this red dot is? That's where the pineal gland is. This pineal gland has been what is depicted in all of this alchemy over and over as what is very important. So here is what Osiris' hieroglyph is. His hieroglyph is an eye and a throne, and translated by E. A. Wallace Budge, who translated the Book of the Dead and these other pyramid texts and things like that. He said that the hieroglyphs for Osiris are an eye and a throne, or an eye and a tent, which is what you see right here and what you see right here. So Osiris represents the pineal gland. I don't know of anybody out there that's ever done this before. There's no pictures out there on the internet or anything that show this. So folks, what you're getting is a first-hand view of the first time that someone's actually gotten down and done this with accuracy. You won't find anything else on the internet about this. But the throne has to rest right up here, right after this opens up, just like this. It's important because there's a lot of factors that have to be right on the money. Where this and the stem ends right here signifies the end of the brain. And what you'll normally see is a staff, that was staff, right at the edge going along this line right here. Also, the area right above the thalamus that you see right here goes into the eye. So that's important. It has to be just like that. And if you notice, the way the brow is, there's this area of the brain right above the corpus callosum. And if you notice, the brow follows that, and it gets smaller on top of the corpus callosum, just the way this one is right here. The stem has to be correct, going right down the spinal cord. These two areas coming off have to be correct, and they follow the outside of the skull, the bone on the outside of the skull, which we'll take a look at in another picture. This stem has to be running right down the top of where the indention of the cerebellum is, and the pineal gland has to be right inside this area. We have looked at this map that the ancient Egyptians left us, and we know that the Nile is basically the spinal cord, and what it does is right here at the base of the skull, which is what you see right here, where it opens up, that's where they place the pyramids. And this is also the place where the pyramids of the brain are located. So as a rough draft, what I decided to do was to just go ahead and highlight all the water areas in the Nile Delta area. Here's our common channels. If you notice, these come up, the decussation that was happening that we saw earlier, right here, this kind of thing right here, where it goes back and forth. That's kind of doing the same thing right here. And then what happens that's common in all of them is it splits right here, which is what you're seeing right here. And this area goes way to the back of the skull, which is what you're happening right here. It's going to the back of the skull. And this other area zigzags and comes up just like this one does right here. See, the second one does the same thing. Comes up, this one goes off to the left, this other one comes straight up like this, which is what you're seeing right here, straight up, and then arcs to the right. Okay, so when we're looking at this thing side by side, there should be a couple of things that really stand out and are very obvious to you. There are at least 3 things that you should be able to see right now. Now let's put it all together. So, I know that it's all going to fit if I just move the tongue right here that you can see. You see how these both follow the same curves? Well, if I move that over, it's going to fit just like a puzzle. There we are, basically. Now, based on the tongue, what you're looking at right now, you see how it fits into that little puzzle piece right there? Now take a look at the eye area. Do you see how that falls right in line with the optic tract? Now look at the tongue again. Now look at the spinal cord area. The spinal cord area is right in line with that track. Well, this building that you see this person overlaid on top of is called the Temple of Man, and it's located in Luxor. And R.A. Schwaller de Lubicz spent a good 17 years over there. He was a master alchemist. He understood the hieroglyphics the ancient Egyptians were showing, and it's really important to understand the way these people thought. This building right here, what he found out was that it maps to the human body. And as you go from one section to the next, there are hieroglyphics in these areas that talk about these various areas of the body. And by looking at the hieroglyphics and looking at the layout of this and the ratios that are contained in each one of these areas, from this to this to this, all the way up to the top, where this is the head, he figured out that what they were actually doing was mapping out the human body, and they were teaching about it. This is the Ankh, and what you'll normally see in Egypt is they'll be feeding themselves this Ankh, which is basically the breath of life is what they're feeding them. But I want you to notice the various characteristics of this thing. This staff right in the center here, it's called the Was staff. So the first thing I noticed about this whole thing is that it was similar to the Great Pyramid. And why do I say that? Is because if we take a look at the Great Pyramid from the side, what you see is that you see an instant similarity. And what you're going to notice is the spinal column. If it's backed up against, if you go and stand up against a wall, for example, you're going to notice 3 places touching: the back of your skull, this area right here on your back, and your butt, your sacrum area. Okay, so if we measure that and we put it right on the pole, and then we make sure that our spinal cord is completely erect and go all the way up to the top, then we have a great clue that what we're looking at right here is the spinal column. You've seen this piece before with these 4 dark areas. Well, what I did was I decided to go ahead and show you how that fits in there just perfectly, to show you that we're actually looking at the human body. So I colored it in for you. So you can see the areas that I colored in that are red, and this is the very top of the spinal column. You can see that it fits in there just like a puzzle. The blue piece that you see right here, this top part of the vertebrae, is actually his 2 fingers, and then the green area here is his thumb. So this area, this width right here, between his thumb and looks like the second to the last knuckle. And so you notice that it's a little box, right? And this little box, and when you see these fingers underneath it, these are usually the indication, when you see these types of things, that we're looking at a spinal column. Everything about these guys, from what I'm seeing so far, has to do with anatomy. It's all about it. These guys were master anatomists. They can look at something 15 different ways and put together a complex puzzle piece that tells about the piece of the anatomy, from bone to muscle to organs, all in one little puzzle piece. It's amazing what these guys did. But indeed, what we're going to get out of this is we're going to start seeing the different scales of man from when you really start taking a look at it. And this is the way the ancient Egyptians thought. They believed that the whole cosmos, the whole universe, was different scales of man. And they couldn't have been more correct. What we're about to see here is something we're going to be using phi and mathematics, okay? And basically it's just geometry. We're not going to be doing any hardcore number crunching because we don't need to do that. All we need to do is pull out our trusty golden rectangle and start mapping phi. And we're going to notice some very interesting things because when you first look at the Nile and the Nile Delta, you don't really notice probably, but it's actually the nervous system of a man, and he is facing to the right. And if you follow the mouth of the Nile Delta, right here, right where it comes in here, and you follow this along, this area that you see right here would go right into the neck, the shoulder area, the rib cage, coming down here all the way to the sacrum, and right here is where the Temple of Man in Luxor is located. Our goal is going to be a couple of things here. This is where the Temple of Man is located. And you remember that I showed you before, what this does is it maps out the human body. Now, if you were going to begin a journey understanding more about the human body, and let's say, for example, that the ancient Egyptians knew that the Nile and the Nile Delta mapped to the human body, then wouldn't it seem like this would be the great place to start? Because you're getting kind of a map to begin with. When you look at the Book of Coming Forth by Day, it starts using the Nile and the Nile Delta metaphorically to describe different areas. For example, as I've said before, and you've seen before, this area up at the top here called Osiris, and I want you to notice where it's located. This is going to be important because what our journey is going to be to go from the Temple of Man in Luxor, and this is going to be where the sacrum starts, or actually this will be the middle of the sacrum, and we're going to move our way up the Nile, and we should basically end right here where Osiris is, the place where the soul is found, is what they said. Now, we're interested in starting at the sacrum. The sacrum is where the Temple of Man is located in Luxor, and that's located right here. And the sacrum it would be considered your second chakra. The first chakra would be your root chakra. So even though we're not covering that, and that's not what they put on the was staff, for the purpose of visualization, to show you the first part of the human body, and how it appears the same as an actual nervous system. This right here is an actual brain that you see right here, and this is your spinal cord going down. And you're going to notice the way that it ends, and it ends in this this thing right here that kind of spreads out into 4 or 5 different pieces. When we take a look here at the Nile area, we see something that looks very similar, like we're looking at the bottom of a spinal cord. So I wanted to show you that real quick because that's located just below the sacrum, and that's the next area that we're going to take a look at right here. And we're going to see the curvatures and how it matches also the human nervous system. So this is the area that we see, and you notice I've got some golden rectangles all over the place, but you will see that we just covered the root, which was right here, and you'll notice that when I drop another golden rectangle down, how it ends right in the middle of this thing, right where it frays out. And this is where we start the human body. So when we take a look at the sacrum right here, and this is where the Temple of Man is located, right there basically, then if we overlay the skeleton on top, we notice that there is the same curvature in the sacrum that we're looking at right here on the Nile. Okay, this is our first area that we're going to look at here. And we're going to take a look at several different pictures of this. Okay, so then we start moving up the Nile, and so we get into the stomach area, and notice the way that the Nile is actually following. It's actually following at an angle, and then, interestingly, it veers off to the left very hard right when it gets to this particular phi area right here. And this is also where the beginning of the rib cage is. So we can see this, and as it goes up the rib cages, you can see that the Nile is following the rib cages out, and then it follows them back in again, just like you see right here. This area that you see right here, where I've got this heart chakra symbol, is important because when we take a look, this is exactly where the heart is located in the human body. It's located in the area which is basically right in the middle of the rib cage. So this is where the heart would be located, right here. And you can see how the Nile follows the rib cages as they come up. And then we have this throat area right here. And the throat area comes up, and then the spinal cord, or the spinal column, ends right here where this throne area is. So right here where this line is, you see the pyramids? Well, this is also located in the exact same place as what's called the pyramids of the brain, and they're located right there. And that's also, and you'll notice the way that you see the way this gets thinner right here and it gets thicker right here? That's the same thing that's happening right here in the Nile. It's thick and then it moves into the spinal cord right here. So the Great Pyramids are located basically right here. And this is where the Temple of Man is located. The Temple of Man is located just above the coccyx, where the sacrum begins. You can see the curvature of the sacrum is the same. Abydos is located on the next phi line that you see right here, and is located still in the sacrum area. Acmeme is also located on a phi line as well, and is located just at the top of the sacrum. And as we move up, right where the rib cages start, we have Asiyut, which is located right here. So at the right edge of these red lines is where the actual temples are located. And so you can see what it's trying to do is it's following the spinal cord all the way up. These various temples are located in key areas. And then right up here is Osiris. And let me show you something interesting about this. Because when we come back to our Google Earth, this is where Osiris is located. This is my doing using phi, and this is where it gives it to us the coordinates. If you go and look up Osiris, it gives you the coordinates right here. This is the front cover page of Ancient Egypt, Science and the Evolution of Consciousness. What you're going to notice here is you have the tree, and this basically follows the logic of what I'm telling you about the pyramids goes. You have the tree here, and the tree actually represents a large head. And then you have a person standing inside the tree, and you notice that his eye, where it's located, is located right in the center of the tree. And if you notice where this branch is and how it follows along, it's basically this Eye of Ra. So what happens is if you put the Eye of Ra on top of that, you'll notice where his eye is, and his eye is right where the pineal gland is. What's actually provided on this thing is on his clothes there is a slot to let you know to put the brain stem right through there, and it ends just like we've seen before, where we saw the toe being important. Where they place their feet has something to do with alchemy on where things are supposed to be lined up when you start putting the puzzle pieces together. And so when they put their toes in certain places, it gives you a guide to use. Interesting, huh? Now I cleaned this up a little bit, and if you remember, there were some key things on this. Remember I was telling you about the toe again? Well, his toe is right on this. You have to make sure that they are right on the money as far as where they're supposed to be. But his toe is right there, and this was staff. I mean, remember this also. This lined up to his leg, as well as that lined up to his leg. And look at the way that line goes right under him. These guys were so amazingly exact with all this stuff. It just freaks me out how exact they are with everything. So, as I suspected, by measuring from the very tip of the sacrum at the Great Pyramids, doing a smaller scale of man, and going up, it ends right in the pineal gland, right where Osiris is a smaller scale of man using the pyramid. Notice that the where the pyramid's base is where the throne is. And so with the brainstem following right down the Nile, the throne resting on the base of the pyramid, then you find that it ends right exactly where the pineal gland is. And this, by the way, is the exact location of Osiris. And what we found out about the Great Pyramid is the same things that we see right here. These are basically cervical vertebrae, and they're showing the same thing. And taking the same angle that we saw, see the angle that we see right here going on, that was the clue that I thought of in order to look in the Great Pyramid. We have this same angle that we see here as we see here, and that's what brought me to the Great Pyramid. So what did we discover there? Well, we discovered all kinds of cool little things. Number one, we noticed that when we use the was staff, and remember it was key because the was staff is divided into two prongs at the very bottom. So in order to properly measure from the sacrum up to the pineal gland, and the reason the Eye of Ra is on him as well is so that we can properly measure where the throne is supposed to be, and keep measurements with everything. And so we noticed if we spear the very tip of the coccyx with his toe located right on that thing, notice right here where his toe is located, and you'll notice the lines that follow up his leg that I've got highlighted in red, and you can even see that on his leg there's these indications, even with the line that they've drawn across here to let us know that this kind of thing is what's supposed to be used here. The interesting thing about the Egyptians and the pyramid and these various hieroglyphs, and I believe that one of the reasons why they used phi, if you think about using phi, it's just it's a wonderful thing to use, especially if you want to, for example, take any of these pieces and plug them into another hieroglyph. All you have to do is adjust the size of it, and as long as the proportion is adjusted along with it, you can properly check to see whether or not you're looking at the same thing or not. You can extrapolate something from one hieroglyph and apply it to another and see whether you're on target or not. And because of phi, that's the reason why these particular things fall in there as easily as they do. And so what the Great Pyramid, you see the lines down his arm and the vertebrae, and I've got these various vertebrae marked off. You can see at each line here, they represent a vertebrae. Now when we take a look at this this graphic here, where you can see he's standing in there and his eye is at the king's chamber, which is also the pineal gland, because this large eye right here would belong to this large face, or this large head right here pointing to the right. And if you notice, these things are all gauged just right as far as their width and everything. It's supposed to fit in that slot just like that, so that way it ends right up at the pineal gland, and everything is always going to be in alignment where it all ends in the pineal gland. So with that logic in mind, we'll just go ahead and put the skull in there, and you're going to notice that one of the things that I've done here is you can see the line going across the top of the pyramid there. You can also see that these end right at the end of the brain, this with the pineal gland, and you'll notice the stem coming off of the Eye of Ra also follows the Grand Gallery as well. So following their logic, this is pretty close to what you're going to see right here as far as the person being inside the larger head. You notice that everything is situated such that this right here is still in the area where the spinal cord is, so the staff would be running right down here grabbing the spinal cord, and you'll notice that it all ends in the same place. So we have the pineal gland But if this arrow right here is also pointing to the pineal gland of the larger head as well. So it's like a vortex. And what we're going to see is when we start looking at these larger and smaller scales of man, if we start here and we zoom out and we look at the larger one, we're going to see how the larger one is also creating things like land masses and stuff like that as well. Right here, in between these two gray areas, is where Osiris is located. That's located exactly where the pineal gland is located. And this large skull that I put there a while ago, and if you remember, when we took a look at the version that was an MRI, you should notice a very similar thing happening right here, because the green area of the Nile is also following the opening that you see right here into the skull. So finally, let's go ahead and apply this this larger scale of man. I've got a good graphic for you this time where you can take a look at what it's going to look like when you move out to say for example that this is the guy that's on the Nile that covers the whole Nile area. Then we can show one larger one, and the one larger one basically ends right here, that all we can see in this area right here that it ends in is Jordan. We have Jordan, Israel, Sinai, and then we have the Nile Delta right here, and then of course going down all the way to the Temple of Man, which is right down here in the sacrum area. So this guy right here will be the smaller version. And as you can see, the dark mountains over here, that's Jordan. We're going to see how that comes into play. So when we start applying our larger and smaller scales of man, this is actually what happens. So our center area right here is Osiris. That would be the same as this location that you see right here. That's Osiris. And these fuzzy areas that you see around it give us a good indication of how this expansion has actually happened. You see this dark ring right around here, and it ends. See where it ends in that mountain right there? So it goes from that mountain all the way back here, and you see this white area right here that kind of follows a curve. It follows the same curve that you see right here. Just zoom in on that a little bit. So this curve that you see right here in the land, this white thing right here is following the same curve. And you notice there's like kind of a dark area, and that dark area stops right at that mountain right here. Just like that. And what it's actually creating, you'll notice that it's creating like a darker area right here. And then if we zoom in even more, we see the same thing. You see this white thing right here? Well, that's the same thing that we saw right here, covering all of this land that we see. And it's happening right here at the same level, except this is actually Osiris. Now also we have this area where the skull has the tip of its head basically eaten off, which is exactly what's happening right here. This is the reason why the land follows a curve right here, is because it's the thalamus. And so that area that's Jordan is right here. And so when we take a look at that, that's Jordan right there. And I want you to notice that where the corpus callosum curves and comes back around, you'll notice that right here there's no land, or there's no mountains right there. You can see the same pattern following us around that you see right here curving around as well. Now let's take a look at a brain just by itself so we can compare the two. So when we take a look, this is actually the MRI version that we're looking at the brain. We make these two the same size, and you'll notice that the first part of the frontal lobe here is the same triangular region that you see right here in the mountains. And remember how this corpus callosum how this is following around. Let's take a look at this over here. Corpus callosum follows around, and you can see it's doing the same thing right here. It's the same curve right here that you see right there. Same curve. So this triangular region, all these mountains right here. And so this is the way that we see things emanate. We see things get larger and larger, and they all end in this one point, and that one point is Osiris, which is the very center of all Earth's land masses. Well, let's take a look at this graphic again. You see how it's creating this dark area right here, right around that mountain, and how this follows the land, just as we see right here. This is the fractal. This is the pattern of the matrix. This is how it looks. So I happen to notice that the angle of that dark triangle there looked very similar. So I happened to pull up the Orion Nebula because I know that the Orion Nebula is also a brain, and I use it kind of as a master key for everything. And if you notice, right in the center of the Orion Nebula is that bright yellow triangle that you see. And right in the middle of that triangle is the vortex that I found a year before NASA, based on art that was found in cathedrals where people had pulled from the collective unconscious. And so what I noticed is after I put lines around the edges of all of it, what I ended up with a triangle with the same slopes as the pyramid. Stay tuned for more as we continue to map Osiris.